Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to our workshop today with the National Lottery Community Fund to walk us through the COVID-19 Charity Fund. I'm delighted to have Kate, Alison, who are going to provide the overview and step us through the application process. And we also have Amanda from the National Lottery Community Fund as well, who will be there to help with the Q&A if needed. So as I've indicated, we are going to record the first part of this session. So on the top left hand of your screen, you'll see the wee red recording button. We received a huge demand for this webinar. However, what we wanted to do was to try to make it as interactive as possible. So we closed our virtual doors when we hit 45, but for us this is a workaround in terms of recording the overview and the step-through process, and then we'll press stop and not record the Q&A, and we'll open that up under Chatham House rules so we can have a conversation with the guys from the National Lottery Community Fund on it. If there are any additional questions or points that are raised that are not already available through the National Lottery's website, then we will circulate those to members as well. So for us, through this approach, we hope to strike the balance of offering information to all of our members and also about providing our delegates with the opportunity to converse freely with one another. Before I hand over to Kate and Alison, I do want to highlight some ground rules in order to make this as productive as possible. If you haven't already, please place yourself on mute and remain on mute unless until we get to the Q&A section, and then we can indicate when you can raise your question directly. We won't have time to go around the room and do virtual introductions, so there is the chat function. So just using that, if you could say your name and your organisation initially so everybody can see who else is in the room with us today. And for those of you who've turned your camera off, if you couldn't mind turning it on, it's especially for the Q&A part, it just makes it easier to engage with everybody. Though if you can, try to avoid just moving it around because it can be distracting for others. We've closed the doors at 45, and I'm not quite sure how many we have on the in the meeting today, so we're not going to hear a range of views, but we do want to give everybody an opportunity to raise at least one question. So I am going to be strict and limited to one question each initially. So hopefully that's as clear as mud for everybody in terms of our ground rules today. So can I say thank you to Kate, Alison and Amanda for working with us on this. We really appreciate your time. And I'm going to hand over to Kate now, who is going to do the overview, and then Alison, who's going to step us through the application process as I understand it. So Kate, over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant, Nora, thank you so much, and thanks to all of you as well for taking the time to come along. I know it's lunchtime, so really appreciate people taking the time, and CO3 for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about the COVID-19 Charities Fund. I know there's a huge amount of interest in it, so we're really keen to be able to try and provide as much and as clear information as straightforwardly as we can, and to answer as many of your questions as we can. I thought it would be useful to begin with just to set out some of the background to this fund as to where the money has come from and why the National Lottery Community Fund is involved. And I'll talk a bit about the overall aim of the fund, sort of eligibility and criteria, before just handing over to Alison, who can give you just a bit more detail about the application process and things to consider in that process as well. So as most of you are well aware, Communities Minister announced in May that she was going to launch this fund of 15.5 million to support charities, which was using Northern Ireland's share of the larger package, which was announced by the Chancellor for this purpose of 750 million UK-wide. And my colleagues in England have been distributing 200 million of that through our England portfolio. And at that time, a number of us in the sector and a range of sectoral reps had been reflecting to the department about the gaps in support. The message, I think, was coming through loud and clear that particularly for those charities who had lost income and from fundraising or from trading activities. Those people that don't have substantial grant funding or public sector contracts, the situation was pretty dire because of the very sudden loss of income, and that many were at imminent risk of collapse. We had also been talking to them about urgency, and again, I know that's a message that you have all been raising, and the need to start getting the money out to the sector. And it was with that in mind that the Department for Communities started talking to us about whether we would be able to administer the fund on their behalf. And that's partly just about being an experienced funder, experienced team with established systems and processes. We knew that we would be able to start getting money out the door more quickly than if the scheme was delivered by the department itself, which is no criticism of the department, but we're a smaller and more agile organisation and better able to adapt quickly to getting a fund of this size set up and run quickly, which was really the main impetus for that. So we got the final green light from the Minister Friday week ago, and the fund opened for application Monday morning, and it will be open for 4 weeks until Friday the 10th of July. It will be, and is, a competitive grant fund. As you all know better than I do, £15 million is not enough to replace all of the income that has been lost in recent months. So there is a maximum grant size of 75,000 to try to ensure that we can help as many organisations as we can in a meaningful way. There were other alternatives being discussed early on about a sort of flat rate scheme similar to some of the business support, but actually that really doesn't seem helpful when charities and different organisations have such vastly different needs. So we wanted to be able to provide small grants and larger grants up to a certain amount, but also to manage the expectation about the scale of support that is available within that £15 million pot. So essentially we expect people only to apply for what we need or what they need. So we do expect that most awards would be less than 75,000. The department has directed that the fund should be a fund of last resort. So helping those who have lost income as a direct result of COVID-19 and who have exhausted or been unable to access other forms of support to mitigate those losses. As an emergency intervention, the department decided that it should cover unavoidable costs up to the 30th of September 2020. And that's the department's decision. And just to be absolutely clear, that this is not lottery money, but direct support from the government that is being administered by us on their behalf. What we have tried to do is put in place a proportionate and light touch process, which we hope will be relatively straightforward for those applying, as we completely understand how difficult it is to think about funding applications right now. And Alison will talk a bit more about that. It is imperfect. It usually takes many months to design and launch new funding programs. But both we and the department were determined that this needed to happen quickly in order to provide relief to those who need it most. And we're clear that we're going to have to take some tough decisions, and that we need to be able to prioritise if we receive a high volume of applications for people in the kind of financial straits that that this fund is aimed at supporting. The basis on which we've agreed we will prioritise is set out transparently in the FAQs on our website and have been agreed with the department. But in the first instance, we will be looking at the extent and the urgency of the financial need between now and the 30th of September. After that, we will be looking at the organisation has already put credible plans in place to mitigate their losses and cover those unavoidable costs. So this fund won't be funding new activity, but it will cover costs for keeping the organisation running between now and the 30th of September. It is unrestricted funding, so there's no list of eligible or ineligible expenditure. We just ask organisations to list the costs that they consider to be unavoidable in order to keep their services running. And that can include loan repayments. It could include in extremis redundancy payments, if that's what it is that you need to keep your organisation going. So if an organisation has outlined that financial need and has put credible plans in place, in case of high demand, we will then look at the extent to which communities rely on that organisation to deliver services. That is not just about the type of organisation or the activity that the organisation carries out, but the impact on the community which the organisation supports, and on community and individual well-being. Because the overall aim is to ensure that there is a diverse and balanced charitable sector in Northern Ireland once the crisis has passed, and we will be monitoring applications as well to ensure that there is an equitable distribution. So this is not just a fund for a specific type of organisation or large organisations or small organisations, but to try and meaningfully help as many people as possible in the sector. We will be making rolling decisions, and what I mean by that is that we won't be waiting until the deadline and collecting all the applications and then assessing them and then ordering them and then putting money out, because that would simply take far too long. That would take months, and so we would be running it the way that we run some of our other funding programs, which is by making rolling decisions in order to start getting money out quickly. And we've already had a number of applications. We will be making decisions next week, and payments will be going out before the end of the month. So that is good news in itself, and we're glad to be able to start getting that out quickly. But we also don't want it to be first come, first served. So the way that we manage that is to have a sort of a cohort, a decision-making meeting every week, and that will sort of identify those who are eligible and meet the criteria, and those that clearly meet them will be awarded funding, and those that maybe meet them but aren't prioritised in the case of high demand will be deferred, and we will pick those up again later in the process to make sure that we're able to spend the whole of the fund at the end of the day, because we don't know what demand will be like until the closing date has actually passed. And those that don't meet those criteria or are not prioritised will not be successful. That is a trade-off. It is the way to do it in order to make sure that money starts flowing out to the sector quickly. A lot of people have asked about eligibility. The eligibility criteria are set by the department, but those who hold grants with other funders are eligible to apply, certainly. People have asked us if they're grant holders of ours, if they're eligible to apply, and they are, but we do encourage people to make sure they've spoken to their funder first, to make sure that they have taken advantage of any flexibilities or additional funding that their funders might be able to offer. So at the National Lottery Community Fund, we offered all of our grant holders the flexibility to use their grant funds for whatever purposes they needed, including organisational costs, to get them through this. We've also offered additional funding to our larger grant holders to overcome financial issues, and we would expect organisations to have spoken to us first before they would come to the COVID-19 Charities Fund. There are, however, several specific funds that were financial support funds for COVID-19 from the executive, which the Department for Communities has excluded, which means that if people have received support from those direct support funds, they won't be eligible to apply for this. The details of that are on the department's website and on ours. So as I say, the department has set the overall terms of this, and while we can talk today at whatever length you like about sort of how to access the immediate support fund, I obviously can't speak on behalf of the department in terms of future funding or future support after the 30th of September. I can reassure people that alongside running this government money, all of our lottery programmes, including Awards for All, remain open, and that we will be looking at processing those applications and prioritising those facing additional challenges from COVID-19 at the same time as running the government money. Some of you will know that we are also responsible for delivering the Dormant Accounts Fund in Northern Ireland, which is a separate pot again, not government, not lottery money. And we consulted last year on the policy directions we had been given by the Department of Finance on that, which were specifically about capacity, resilience and sustainability in the sector. Obviously, the pandemic has made the sector even more fragile than it was and that we heard about when we did that consultation. But the Finance Minister was clear that it was for government to step in and provide emergency support in the first instance, as they have now done through this fund, and that the Dormant Accounts Fund should then be available after that to support adaptation and longer term resilience in the sector. So we will be working still to open the Dormant Accounts Fund. It will be a bit later in the year than we had originally intended, but it will be coming before the end of the year. And that is another significant pot of money that is now about £20 million that will be there to provide sort of some longer term reassurance to the sector. I don't want to distract too much from the purpose of this around the COVID-19 Charities Fund, but I thought it just worth mentioning something about dormant accounts, and I am happy to talk about it a bit more. But I think that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm going to hand over to Alison, just maybe to say a bit more about the specifics of the application process around this fund.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Alison, over to you. You need to unmute yourself there.
Okay, thank you. So I think as Kate has said, the application process is clearly set out on our website, and there are also some frequently asked questions there which would help answer most queries about how the fund will operate, and that's also where you'll find the link to the application form for the fund. So I'm just going to really highlight a few top tips about applying so that you're well prepared whenever it comes to completing the application form. The first thing is really to check if you're eligible for the funding. And this is clearly set out on both our webpage and that of the departments. Charities applying must meet all of the eligibility criteria, and we may cover that later as part of our discussion, but there's a clear sort of list on the website about what the different eligibility criteria are. The next thing is really to work out how much you think your income will have been reduced as a result of COVID-19 from the period the 1st of April to the 30th of September. And the next thing is to work out how much you need to spend to cover your unavoidable costs for that same period. And lastly, if there is a deficit, think about how much of this you can cover by using your reserves, asking other funders to repurpose their grants, or through other fundraising that you might be able to do. So we prepared a financial overview template as part of the application process for you to capture these figures. And there are also some questions on the application form for you to explain your charity's financial situation. There's also a video on our website that will help you fill in the financial template. And we've just recently updated the financial template based on some feedback, and we've updated our videos. Hopefully that will help you just clarify what we require in each of those boxes around income, expenditure and reserves. So that's really a brief run through, Nora, of the key points, I think. I'm happy to take any further questions. I think you're on mute, Nora.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Kate. So at this point, we will stop the recording.